Dorothy, tell us a little bit about yourself. For example, have you always lived in Texas?
I'm born and reared in Texas. I was born in Farmersville, Texas, which is north of Dallas, about 50 or 60 miles and about 75 miles from Fort Worth, Texas. It's a small town. It's just exactly halfway between Greenville and McKinney. And I always tell you, Rick, there's three, I think there's three very important people that came from Farmersville. One was General Ramey, who was a four-star general, who was in the Second World War. And Audie Murphy, who was in the movie star that lived right next door to me. And, of course, I think Dorothy Nichols.
Always the modest one.
That's right. Now, I went to school there, and I taught school there for about 7 years. And, of course, like I said, that was back in the days when your religion and so much played an important part as to who was on the board, whether you got a job or not. And I think my daddy was so smart that he could see about that. He saw that I wanted to go ahead and do things in my life. So he suggested maybe that I advance, because I was going to college, and I was going up Howard. I was getting my BS degree, and I was going on getting my master's degree. So he just decided that he thought I should go on and encourage me not to leave Farmersville for any particular reason other than he thought, as long as I stayed there, I wasn't going to advance. And we had dogs at home. My daddy was the one that had the dogs. We had, first dog I can remember as a young girl was an old collie and a patch. And that dog saved me from drowning because my daddy was going to teach me how to swim one day. And he pitched me into a gravel pit when I wasn't but about 7 or 8 years old. Because I was a girl, but I was still a boy as far as Papa was concerned. So he just said, you either swim or you're going to drown. And this collie came right in after me because he saw that I was going down. And, of course, we love the old collie. And I got a real good whipping one night. I mean, a whipping. Because when wintertime come, my mother would not let the dogs in the house. But I brought the dog in the house and put it on Mama's starch bed. And she found the dog in there in my bed, and he and I both got it. But then we had a beagle. Papa had a beagle. And I can look back now and see, after judging some of these beagles, that he looked pretty good. And then we had a little Boston Terrier who he loved dearly. I didn't care for the Boston too much, but I can see now he was a pretty nice little dog. Then, of course, I hit the age, that boys became very important to me, and I was much of an athlete. I was quite an athlete from the standpoint that I thought. So I played ball, and when I was teaching school, I played professional basketball.
Oh, you did?
I played professional basketball when I was in college. I had to because I couldn't go to college. I didn't have any money, so I had to work my way through school. And I played professional basketball in college and won the scholarship. And then I would referee basketball games. I would teach school all day and referee basketball games after school for $1 a game. And then I worked at the picture show at night and ran the picture show on Saturdays and Sundays. So you see, I didn't have much time for just a real social life that lots of girls did because I worked. I worked all the time. Then, of course, I was going to school. I was always a scholar in school. I wasn't the smartest person, but I graduated as salutatorian, not valedictorian, but salutatorian when I graduated from high school, which is second to the best. But I had so many other interests that I had. I was born in a family of 7 children, and we all got along. I was next to the last one in the family, and, of course, Papa thought I was going to be a boy when I was born, and consequently I wasn't. So he called me counterfeit for a long time. Instead of nickels, he called me a counterfeit nickel. But we had a good relation in our family. And as I said, my daddy and I taught me a lot about that. He taught us, the girls, how to use a gun. He went hunting. He taught us how to ride horses, just right along with the boys. And it's still at the same time we had to be a lady. We were taught to be a lady, too.
So when did you really get started in dogs per se?
Well, after I went to North Texas University, and I graduated there in the North Texas. And
wait, what did you major in?
Majored in English and minored in social studies and math. Math didn't seem to go along, but I've always thought math was quite important. So I minored in math and minored in social studies. Then I was teaching, had an opportunity to teach in the college while one of the professors was gone one day. So they asked me would I take his place, and I did, which was a free gratis thing, but it also helped me. Then a man interviewed me to go to Fort Worth to teach school in 1935. So I went to Fort Worth and got a job in Fort Worth, and I went to teaching school in Fort Worth in 1935. Then I taught Fort Worth. I taught in one school there, 27 years, in one solitary school. That's where I taught Ed Bivens.
You did what now?
I taught Ed Bivens.
Is that right?
That's right. I taught accelerated classes, and the old saying is when they one time started with me, they had to stay with me. So Ed was one of my students, a very brilliant young boy, and very interested in what he was doing, and you could see all the potentials that he had. And of course, it was later on that Ed and I both, had interest in dogs. And I also taught Paula Bradley, who is Don Bradley's wife.
Oh, yeah?
And I've often said I don't know whether I taught her enough or not, but I did. Of course, I'm very fond of Paula, and I'm very, of course, I love Ed. I always have. He's always been one of my very favorites. He was one of my very favorite students because he was smart, and he's done so much with his life.
Well, let's get back to you and the dogs. When did you really get involved in the sport of dogs?
When I started, I guess, in the 40s, I met a friend, and we started talking about dogs, and he said he was going out to the lake and pick out a dog for a boxer. And of course, that hit me. I've always loved the boxer. And I went with him, and he picked out a boxer, and I picked it out. I'm going to be frank with you. Then after he picked it out, the girl kept it for a long time. Then she called us and said she couldn't keep the dog anymore, and he said he's going to have to give it away or sell it. And I said, let me have it. So he let me have the dog. So I kept the dog, and I went out and took it to a kennel, which I didn't have. I had an apartment. I couldn't keep it in the house. So I put it in the apartment. When I couldn't put him in the apartment, so I had to put him in the kennel. And I used to go out there in obedience. I started that boxer in obedience. And I would go out there every morning before school and train that dog. I'd put on my slacks and things and go every afternoon after school was out and train that dog. And I had one of the highest scoring boxers in the United States for years.
Is that right? So a boxer was your very first competition dog?
That's right. And I put him in competition. First score he made was 198, and the second was 200, second.
Oh.
And the next one was 197 and a half, which he got a distinguished award.
I should think so. That's an incredible score.
It really was. And then, of course, I took him on through CDX and utility.
Now, wait. May I ask, somewhat hesitantly, just what year did you get the boxer?
1953. I guess I had him in my back. 49.
So you've been at this a long time.
See, I started judging in 1952.
Did you really? Now, did you start out in obedience?
I started out in obedience. What happened is the person where I was training my dog in the kennel, there were very few of us, They knew so very little about obedience. We were learning from the book. And this boy took down one day with emergency appendicitis, and he asked me would I take over, and I took over. And we were going to put on a little match, which didn't consist of 10 or 15 people. That's back in the 40s. And I put on that match by myself because Bill was sick and couldn't. And so they called me back out there one night and said, why don't you try to get your license or get approved to judge? And he said, we need judges because we don't have any in this area. And I said, well, I'm sure they would probably never consider me. He said, oh, yes, they would. So they gave me my novice license almost right off the ball because I had finished the dog. And then we worked in CDX, and they gave me my CDX approval, and then they gave me my utility approval. Then I got real interested in tracking.
In tracking?
Yes, sir. I did all my poodles were tracking dogs.
Is that right? So you judged obedience for a long time before you got involved with conformation.
It was about I think it's 6 to 1 when I started conformation, and I started out with poodles.
Well, now had you been breeding dogs?
Yeah, I was breeding, mostly the standard poodles, and I had some miniature poodles, but I did most of my breedings as standard poodles, and I finished all my standard dogs in conformation and obedience and tracking.
Really? All three, huh?
And I also took those dogs to Mexico and got the Mexican championship in all three, and met them to Canada and got the championship in Canada in all three.
Why was it so important to you to compete in all three areas?
I think obedience is just as important as conformation. I really do. I think they're so much easier to live with. Any dog is easy. They were smart, And, you know, I wanted to live with my dogs. I didn't want to just put them in a kennel and then just take them out and just put them in a show ring. I wanted to live with those dogs. They were company. They were a companion. And I did a lot of charity work. I used to go to the nursing homes and put on demonstrations. And in the schools, I would, for make up a little money, we'd come in and they'd empty the gym, and we'd bring in all my obedience people that I was training. I had a school 19 years.
Oh, you did?
A Texas Tri-City Obedience School out of Arlington, Texas. And I taught obedience out there between 18 and 19 years. And, I mean, having been a colonel in the ROTC.
Wait, who was a colonel in the ROTC?
I was a colonel in ROTC.
Oh, really? Well, that explains.
that explains probably.
I started to say something, caught myself just in time.
Yeah, but so it was right down my alley to train and drill people and really to do that type of work. And then I had this boy that was one of my lieutenants in ROTC that I took with me out to train. He had a Weimar on it. And David was very, very good in training people to know how to march and to turn right turn and left turn, about turn, you know. And so consequently, I had that made. But it was, I stayed with that a long time. Then I went back to work on my doctor's degree, and I was going to have to give up something. I was trying to teach school, which I taught there, and then I went out to another high school as a vice principal. So then I went out to South. I was taught Carter Riverside 27 years, and then I was a vice principal out of Southwest High School the rest of the time. So I was working on my doctor's degree out at Tempe, Arizona, and I was trying to teach obedience and then also judge in a confirmation, and it just got too much for me, so I was going to have to give up something. So I felt like I had organized the club, the Texas Tri-City Obedience Club. And so I thought that those people had trained under me, and they were good and smart, and they could work that way. So I gave that up first. Then we had a confirmation seminar at Wichita Falls, Texas, and Mr. Brumby came up there to talk with us. And now we're going way back there now, Rick. This one yesterday. And Mr. Brumby gave a very good seminar up there, and I was there. I was the only judge that was there. The rest of the people were just exhibitors and all. And he kind of took his text on me. He referred to me so many times that you take Dorothy back there. She's judging confirmation. She has no business showing her dog. Or she's an obedient. She doesn't have any business showing her dog. But because I was judging very close around. And he said, I think AKC would prefer that you not judge if you're going to show, or vice versa. So, of course, I had several years of it, and I had thought, well, I better make up my mind, because they weren't going to let me go any further if I didn't. So I talked to Mr. Brumby, and he said, which should you rather do, judge or show? And I said, well, I'm no young chicken even then. And he said, I think you'd make a good judge, but you need to think about which is going to be your priority. So I took as more or less leaned to the judging as my priority, because I could see I could go on through my older years where I was going to have to give up training. And then, too, the competition and confirmation got so much better. The better dogs were coming on. Our dogs were not that good to compete with the dogs that we had then or today. I used to compete against Rex Van Venner, Sabella, which was very young. He looked like a little boy, 14 years old. And, of course, you know what kind of food he had there. And there was Lee Murray. You're going into